good day, everyone. Welcome to our Faculty of Dentistry webinar series on dental age estimation via CBCT. I'm Dr. Yenny. We are excited to have you all here today as we delve into one of the most important aspects of forensic dentistry. So, dental age estimation plays a crucial role in many areas of our profession, from identifying the human remains to determining the age of suspects in criminal investigations. So with the advent of CBCT technology, we now have a powerful tool at our disposal for accurate and reliable dental age estimation. Today we have an esteemed expert, Dr. Muhammad Khan Asif, who will be sharing his insights and experiences on this topic. So a brief profile of Dr. Muhammad. He is a forensic odontologist specialized in fetal, child, and adult dental identification and age estimation. He and his core researchers have introduced a new method of computer-assisted animated superimposition in bite mark analysis for identification of the victims and criminals. Moreover, Malays, Indian, and Chinese population-specific dental age estimation methods among children and young adults have been developed by employing the artificial neural networks, or abbreviated as ANN. He has also investigated and published research on bone microstructural measurements using CBCT. He and his core researchers are the first one in Southeast Asia who have introduced the method of volumetric analysis of dental structures using CBCT images for age estimations in adults. He is specialized in CBCT image analysis and other 3D modeling software like Mimics, Trimatics, and Simplant. So Dr. Muhammad has published 23 high-impact research articles in the WOS, or Web of Science Index journals, in the last 6 years and still counting. And he's definitely one of the few forensic odontologists in Pakistan, and he's the first forensic odontologist with a PhD degree in oral and maxillofacial forensic imaging in South Asia. So, my dear audiences, okay, so please sit back, relax, and explore the fascinating world of dental age estimation via CBCT. If you have any questions, okay, you may actually post in the comment box and I will direct it to Dr. Muhammad, which is now already on the screen with us at the end of his talk. All right. So, hi, Dr. Muhammad. A very good afternoon to you.
Yeah,
yes,
good
so
afternoon.
now I will pass the floor to you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor.
I'll share my screen.
Yeah, you can share the screen. Let's see.
Okay.
Okay, I will remove mine first. So now we should wait Dr. Muhammad to share his screen, then he can proceed with his talk.
Yes, just give me a second.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so can you see my screen? Yeah, shared screen.
Yes, doctor. Yes,
okay.
I can.
Okay,
so now I should pass the floor to you. Thank you, doctor.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone, and assalamu alaikum. I hope all of you must be enjoying good health. Thank you very much, Dr. Yani, for your kind comments and welcoming remarks. I would also like to thank Professor Dr. Prabhakaran Nambiar and Masa University for inviting me to deliver a talk on this newly developed age estimation method. As we have limited time, so I'll just straight away proceed with the presentation because we need some time for the question answer sessions as well. So as Dr. Yani already mentioned that why dental age estimation and identification is important, or why is it useful? Now, teeth are the most calcified structures of the human body, and they can withstand physical, chemical, mechanical, and nutritional stresses to a great extent. And that's why they can be used quite effectively for the identification and age estimation. And recently, we have been working in the with the geology department at the University of Malaya. And the picture that you see on the left side is actually a tooth fossil, which have been shared with us by the geology department, which dates back to about zero point 0.5 million years old. So you can imagine how the teeth can withstand all these harsh environmental conditions. And that's why they can be used very effectively for identification and age estimation. And similarly, people say that dead people cannot talk, but we as a forensic odontologist believe that they can talk to us. And the picture that you see here is the pink teeth, which is indicating the accumulation of hemoglobin in the dental tubules. And this mainly occurs after the torturous death. So they can talk to you as well. So that's why teeth plays a very significant role in the identification and age estimation. Now, when we talk about the implementation of the legal justice system, of course, dental means or dental age estimation plays a very important role in the civil and legal justice and criminal investigations to implement the legal justice system. But besides that, it plays a very significant role in disaster victim management. And when we talk about disasters, whether they are natural or man-made in the form of earthquakes, tsunamis, aviation disasters, they may be sudden, unexpected, and they involve large amount of loss of life. And it's very difficult for the local government resources to manage such a situation on such a large scale, especially when we talk about the developing world. So, forensic odontology can play a very significant role, especially dental age estimation, one of the aspects of it. And why is it important? Because according to the Interpol, there are three primary identifiers that can be used for the identification purposes: DNA analysis, biometric fingerprinting, and dental identification. And dental identification is one of the simple and quickest method of identification as far as these three primary modalities are concerned. I'll not go into the detail of the limitations and the merits of each of these modalities, but dental identification is one of the means, and especially when even if it's DNA analysis, dental DNA is one of the reliable sources as well. Why? Because as I said, teeth can withstand harsh environmental stresses to a greater extent. That's why they can also be a source of DNA for the identification purposes. Now, coming back to the dental age estimation and why we felt the need of developing this new method of dental age estimation based on the CBCT image analysis. Now, Camerier and their co-researchers, they've introduced a new method in 2006 of estimating dental age by assessing the open apices of the left seven mandibular teeth. And this method proved to be very effective and was validated all over the world on various populations. But we all know that despite the effectiveness, this is the beauty of research, that you keep on exploring more reliable methods, more accurate methods. And we all know that they developed this method based on the panoramic radiographs, which is a two-dimensional radiographic modality. So, because two-dimensional radiographs have some limitations, and some of the major limitations is that you cannot see any sectional details using two-dimensional radiographs because it gives you only the two-dimensional view. And especially when it comes to magnification, distortion, or resolution, the two-dimensional radiographs have limitations because of various reasons. Those of you who are aware about the radiographic images and how they're taken, you can see that in the two-dimensional radiographs, the magnification occurs because of various reasons. Let's talk about the panoramic radiographs. In panoramic radiograph, the distance between the film and the anatomical structures which we want to image in the radiograph, they're at a distance from each other. And that's why, because of that distance, there's a magnification. And similarly, if we talk about the X-ray source inclination or orientation, it's also at 5 to 8 degrees upwards. So because of that, there's also magnification. So these are some of the factors that's why we thought that we can develop a more reliable method based on the three-dimensional radiographic imaging modality rather than using two-dimensional radiographs. Now, another thing which is logical as well, that it's more logical to assess the three-dimensional anatomical structure, which in this case is teeth, by using the three-dimensional imaging modality rather than using the two-dimensional anatomical radiographs. So the first research objective of our study was to develop age estimation equation, regression equation, by investigating the relationship between chronological age and the surface area of the developing maxillary canine apices using CBCT images of auxiliary canines aged 7 to 14 years of age. So this was our first objective, and we wanted to see a correlation between age and the developing surface area of the canine apices among 7 to 14 years of age. So the first objective was addressing to develop the age estimation equation for children of aged 7 to 14 years. The second objective of the study was to develop again another age estimation regression equation by investigating the relationship between the chronological age and surface area of the developing mandibular third molars, apices, and among juveniles and young adults aged 13 to 14 years using CBCT data. So these were basically the two research objectives. One was to develop an equation or regression model for children based on canine root apices development using CBCT images. And the second one was to develop a regression equation for Malaysian juveniles and young adults aged 13 to 24 years of age using CBCT images. Now, the variables that we used, that we investigated for the research objective for both of them were the chronological age, because actually we wanted to correlate whether there's any relationship of the changes in the surface area of the developing root apices with age or not. So we took it as a dependent variable or output variable, and the independent variables on which we wanted to test whether the chronological age depends on these predictive variables or not. So we have the surface area of the root apices. In the case of first objective, it was for the canines. In cases of the second of the objectives, it was for the third molars. Then we wanted to see the gender effect, whether the gender is fitting with the model or not, whether there's any effect of gender on the root development or not. Similarly, ethnicity, because Malays and Chinese, although they both belong to the Mongoloid race, but some of the studies have shown morphometric variations in both of these ethnic groups as well. So we wanted to investigate the effect of ethnicity on the age estimation as well, and also on the age estimation regression equation. And the status of the root development, whether the root is open or closed. So we wanted to see the effect of the status of the root development on the age estimation model as well. Now, for the first research objective, which I've mentioned that we developed it for the children aged 7 to 14 years, and we used canines, we used 191 training samples on which we developed the model. And then after developing the model or equation, we tested it on 96 validation samples on which we validated our regression equation, which we have developed. So we have further divided them into 8 age group from 7 years to 14 years of age for equal distribution or stratification of our sample, because if the sample is not stratified accurately, it will give you biased results when you develop a regression equation or when you want to see a strength of correlation. Now, as the main idea was to develop the 3D models of the developing teeth, so we used Mimic software and 3Matic software for this purpose. Mimic software was used to develop the 3D models of developing maxillary canine apex, as you can see over here, and 3Matic software was used to assess the surface area of the developing root apex. So the surface area was measured using the 3Matic software. So once we developed the 3D models in Mimic software, we transported them to 3Matic software for surface area analysis. There were different steps that were involved in developing the 3D models in Mimic software to create the 3D dimensional models of the maxillary canines, because we used maxillary canines for the first research objectives. The first step was to thresholding, then multiple slice editing region growing phase, and 3D reconstruction or modeling. Let's go through them step by step. First was the thresholding. Now, those of you who are aware about the radiography or radiology, we at this stage we assign a grayscale threshold value to each of the voxels based on the density of those structures. Now, as I mentioned at the start of the presentation, the teeth are the most calcified structures of the human body, so the density is very high. And as a result, because of this high calcification, mineralization, you can clearly demarcate the growing dental structures from the surrounding structures. So we have assigned a grayscale threshold value, as you can see here, preset grayscale threshold value of 1200 to 3071. Okay, but we have to keep in mind one thing, that these are the developing teeth. So mineralization is taking place, calcification is taking place. So in some of the cases, we saw that even the software was not accurately identifying the growing maxillary canines or mandibular third molars on which we were developing our model on. And as a result, what we did, we wanted to cross-check whether the software has accurately selected the growing maxillary canine or not. So we used another tool, which is multiple slice editing phase. And as the name suggests, we were able to add or remove the masks which the software has not accurately selected. So this tool helped us to cross-check whether the software has accurately selected the calcified tooth structure or not. Now, why this phase was important? See, we used the voxel size of 0.30 millimeters, and the voxel size has an effect which we call it the partial volume averaging effect. And if you use the smaller voxel size, the resolution can be enhanced. But because of some of the limitations, the scans that we have included in our study had the voxel size of 0.30 millimeters. And as a result of partial volume averaging effect, sometimes the software was not accurately demarcating the small minute structural details, or was not selecting the proper calcified structure of the developing maxillary canine as well as for the mandibular third molars. So that's why this tool was very helpful, because we made sure that we are selecting the growing teeth very accurately. Then region growing phase. Now this phase is important because you just want to see the growing maxillary calcified structure of the growing maxillary canines. You don't want any other structures or other teeth. So in this way, we have separated the teeth with which we were concerned, and we have removed all the other areas. So we have grown the region which we wanted to develop as a 3D model. And this is how the 3D models were developed. And you can see quite, this is the early stage of development of the maxillary canines, and this is a bit advanced stage. And if you compare this with the two-dimensional radiographic methods in which we assess the age or estimate the age based on the root apices, it's very clear. You can see the margins of the developing maxillary canine very accurately in comparison to the two-dimensional methods. And this is the reason that why we wanted to develop this method, because it's more logical to assess the three-dimensional structure using three-dimensional imaging tool rather than assessing the same three-dimensional anatomical structure using two-dimensional radiographs, which mainly panoramic radiographs were used. Now, this is how I have this video. This is how the three-dimensional models of the maxillary canines are seen on the Mimic software once the 3D models are developed. So this is slightly advanced stage of the maxillary canines. This is the apex. You can see the bulb canal and the chamber inside as well. And the best thing is that you can move it around, because you want to assess the developing root apex very accurately. So this is how you can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can see all the structures, the labial, the palatal, the mesial and the distal root surfaces. Like you can see over here, you can zoom it in, zoom it out. The margins are very clearly defined in this three-dimensional image model of the maxillary canine. Okay, now this is another canine. You can see one thing which we observed was a bit strange as well. In some of the cases, the root development was not uniform in all the three planes. For example, in the labial, palatal, mesiodistal. Like in this case, you can see that the palatal root is less formed as compared to the labial aspect. So this was the advantage because you were looking at the three-dimensional structure. So we have also recorded these values as well. And maybe future studies can also look at that which of the surfaces of the root apexes develops first as compared to the other surfaces. So this was an advantage because we are looking at the three-dimensional models rather than two-dimensional images. And you cannot assess this using the panoramic radiographs or two-dimensional radiographs. Now, this is the early stage of development of the maxillary canines. You can see the crown formation is completed. The root is about to develop now. And you can clearly demarcate, you can clearly figure out the margins of the developing maxillary canine. Okay, so yes, the next step was to transfer these 3D models which have been developed in Mimic software to 3matic software, where the surface area analysis was done. And we followed two steps. One was to create the curve around the margins of the developing root apex, and second was to reconstruct the surface which have been marked. So now you can see over here, these curves were developed along the margins of the developing root apex using the 3matic software. So it was very user friendly. We have accurately demarcated the margins and it was very effective when we were doing it. And this is how the three-dimensional reconstruction of the surface area of the root apex was done. And you can see this root apex surface area, and which was then automatically calculated by the 3matic software. I'll play the video for the 3matic software as well, how the surface area was marked, how the surface area was reconstructed or constructed. After marking the curves along the margins of the developing root apex, the surface area was developed. And this surface area was then automatically calculated by the software, the 3matic software. So the 3D models were developed in Mimic software, and then they were transferred to 3matic software for the surface area analysis. Now you can see clearly the surface that has been developed. It's not just a flat line. It has followed the curvature of the root apex. You can see over here as well. So it's not just a straight line. So it's more accurate because they're following the curvatures of the roots. Now this one is a bit more advanced stage of the canine. You can see it's not straight line, flat line. It has followed the curvature of the developing root apex. Okay, so this was for the first research objective, how we develop the 3D models of the canine. Now for the second objective for which we wanted to develop age estimation regression equation for the juveniles and young adults based on the mandibular third molars. So 128 training sample was selected and 55 validation sample was used. So equation was developed based on 128 sample and then it was validated on the 55 separate sample of third molars. Now, similarly, all those steps were followed, how we did for the maxillary canines. First, the thresholding phase, we assigned the grayscale threshold values to the developing maxillary to developing mandibular third molars. Then we perform the multiple slice editing phase in order to make sure that the software has accurately selected the developing margins of the mandibular third molars. And then we perform the region growing phase in order to separate the developing third molars from the surrounding structures, and in the end, the 3D models of the mandibular third molars were developed. As you can see, the mesial and the distal root of the third molar and the margins are very clear. And we also use the smoothing effect as well in this case, because in some of the cases when smoothing factor was not used, the margins were not that clear. So we have used the smoothing factor, which is also one of the tools offered by the Mimic software. So this is now the 3D model, which is developed in Mimic software of the mandibular third molar. You can see the mesial and the distal roots. For this study, we have only used the sample. We incorporated the sample with only two roots, mesial and distal roots. We excluded the cases like fused roots or one roots. We have excluded that in order to make sure or standardize our methods and the regression equation. So you can clearly see the canals as well. All the different surfaces can be viewed using the Mimic software once you develop the 3D model. But we were mainly concerned with this developing root apices region. Okay, then similarly, how we moved the canines, how we transferred them to 3-matic software to assess the surface area. We have also moved all the third molars to the 3-matic software for the surface area analysis. And the curves were drawn along the margins of the developing mesial and the distal roots of the mandibular third molars. And this is how the 3D surface reconstruction of the developing root apices of the mandibular third molars were done. This is the third molar, which you can see here in the 3-matic software, where the curves were drawn and the 3D surface reconstruction was performed, and you can clearly see the surface area of the developing mandibular third molars. Again, it's not just a flat line, it's followed the curvature of the developing root apices. So now these are the results. Now for the maxillary canines, there was a very strong, I would say excellent correlation between the chronological age and the maxillary canine surface area of the apexes, or the apex, 0.978, and with the coefficient of determination 0.956, which is an excellent correlation with the standard error as 0.499. For the mandibular third molars, the correlation value was 0.95, which is also an excellent correlation, which is indicating that this surface area analysis can be used for dental age estimation. Now, once we found a good strong correlation for both of these methods, for the maxillary canines and the mandibular third molars, we developed the age estimation regression equation, which was the main objective of the study. And this was the equation which was developed for maxillary canines. And as you can see, this is to predict the age. Once we enter the apex surface area value, which we have calculated using the Mimics or 3-matic software, and then after entering the gender, whether it's male or female, and whether the status of the root apex, whether it's open or closed. How we did this for gender, we have given codings to the data. Now you can see for male, we'll enter 0 in this section. For females, we'll enter 1. And similarly for open apex, we'll use 0, and for closed apex, we'll enter the value, or we'll compute the value of 1 in this equation. One thing which we found that ethnicity did not contribute to the fit of the age estimation model. And we have also tested difference or statistical difference in the strength of correlation values between Malays and Chinese ethnic groups. And we did not find any statistical difference or any significant statistical difference between Malays and Chinese ethnic group. And this could be the reason because both of them belong to the same mongoloid race. So that's why ethnicity did not contribute to the fit of the age estimation model. But in case of third molars, we found that ethnicity did contribute to the fit of the age estimation model. So, but still, based on the correlation values, it is clear that this model could be used for reliable age estimation cases. Okay. Then we have for the Malaysian juveniles and adults, which we developed a linear regression equation based on third molars. And you can see the age estimation model again. If we enter the surface area of the mandibular third molars apices, and for the mandibular third molars, we have added the surface area of the mesial and the distal roots combined. We have added them, and then we have computed it in this equation. And similarly, for the open and closed apex, 0 and 1 was given. For the ethnicity, for Malay, the coding was 0, and for Chinese, it was 1. So if we have a Chinese ethnic group, we'll use 1 coding here. And if we have Malay case, we'll use 0. And similarly for the gender as well. Okay, then because whenever you are developing age estimation regression equation or any of the regression equation, especially multiple linear regression equation, you have to validate it. So we have developed a model, age estimation model for canines based on 191 sample. Now, then we also tested it on a separate validation sample. And the results, we have also assessed the group-wise, the gender-wise, the ethnicity-wise, reliability of our model, and we figured out or the difference between the chronological age and the estimated age, and we figured out the age, the mean absolute error value was 0.30, which is very acceptable. And even if you look at the age estimation regression equation, the standard error of the estimate value that came here was 0.499. So the validation results was 0.30 years, which is indicating that this regression equation can be used very accurately and reliably. Similarly, for the mandibular third molars that we have developed for the juveniles and young adults, the mean absolute error value or the difference between the estimated age and the actual age or the chronological age was 0.82, which is also within the standard error of the estimate value, which came during the correlation analysis, which was 1.144. So based on these validation results, then we concluded that yes, both of these methods and both of these regression equation can be used quite reliably and accurately on the Malaysian children, juveniles, and young adults. Now, clinical applications. Now, there are a number of applications in terms of forensic application is that, especially when I will talk about in terms of research, because previously most of the diagnostic procedures in dentistry, I would say, and not only in forensic sciences, have been developed mainly on two-dimensional radiographs in the 20th century, I would say. But in the 21st century, since the introduction of the 3D imaging modalities like CBCT, medical CT, and other like MRI and all these, most of the researchers are now moving from the two-dimensional towards three-dimensional because it makes sense as well. It is logical as well to assess the three-dimensional structure using the three-dimensional imaging modality. So this method would pave a new approach for the worldwide researcher to explore. Then, of course, besides helping in the implementation of the legal justice system all over the world in terms of the criminal and civil legal procedures or investigations, this can be used quite effectively for the disasters as well, for mass disasters as well. And then, of course, the CBCT has some advantages over other medical imaging modalities as well, like medical CT, because nowadays, even if we are using it for the live subjects, we can use it because we can limit the radiation dose to a greater extent. In fact, if we use the voxel size, if we can change the scanning parameters, And if you use the field of view of a smaller size, the radiation exposure can be reduced up to 17 to 19 microsieverts, which is almost equivalent to that of the panoramic radiograph. So this imaging modality can be used quite effectively. And nowadays we have very smart units of CBCT in which they offer very limited radiation exposure. Recommendations for future research, because this method has been validated on Malay and Chinese ethnic groups. So this method and this regression equations must be validated on various populations across the world, because in the two-dimensional radiographic methods we have also seen a lot of variation in the results, and the results were very different for different populations. Uh, as this method was developed on maxillary canines and mandibular third molars, so future studies can also investigate other type of teeth. Maybe we can come up with better and more reliable age estimation method, and maybe the mean absolute error values can be reduced. Yes, we use the scanning parameters of 0.30 millimeter voxel size, and the field of view was also larger. So future studies should also change the scanning parameters, and then look out that whether we can develop a more reliable age estimation regression equation as compared to this one. So scanning parameters should also be changed, and also should be tested on different CBCT units as well. These were the articles that we have published. This one was the first one, which is published in Legal Medicine, a novel method of age estimation in children using three-dimensional surface area analysis of maxillary canine apices. Then this is the second one, which we have published for the second research objective, which was to develop age estimation regression equation for mandibular third molars. This was also published in Legal Medicine, which is a Web of Science indexed in perfected journal. Then another article that we published in Journal of Forensic Radiology and Imaging. In this one, we have developed a threshold value to differentiate between adults and juveniles of 18 years. So if the surface area of the third molars are less than 9.25 millimeters square, so the case or the chances are that the individual is more than 18 years of age. So this was also published in Journal of Forensic Radiology and Imaging. And recently we have published another article, Dental Age Estimation for Malaysian Children, in which we have compared the Camarier's method with our method, but the panoramic radiographs were taken from the CBCT images of the similar cases. And we have figured out that both of these methods, whether two-dimensional Camarier's method or the method that we have developed, is both effective on Malaysian population, and there was no significant difference in terms of the correlation values. But in terms of mean absolute error values, the three-dimensional method showed slightly better results as compared to the two-dimensional Camarier's method. So thank you very much. This was all about the presentation. I've added some of the sceneries from the northern part of Pakistan, and any one of you, if you are here, you visit Pakistan, I'll be host for you guys, and it's beautiful. You must come here and see the north of Pakistan. Yeah, thank you very much. So now I'll open the floor to the question answer session. Yes, Dr. Yani.
Hi, thank you, Doctor, for your time and effort in preparing and delivering the presentation. And on behalf of the audiences, we would like to thank you for your valuable insights and the knowledge that you have shared with us. Yeah, so for now, I would like to invite the audience to ask any questions that you may have. And I can actually facilitate this by reading out any questions in the chat box. Okay. Yeah, so we have one question from Uide Jun. How does dental age estimation using cone beam CT differ from traditional methods such as a panoramic radiograph?
Yes. Okay. So as I mentioned, that this was the main reason that why we went to develop this method. See, in the two-dimensional radiograph, or panoramic conventional method, you're looking at the three-dimensional anatomical structure using two-dimensional radiograph, which doesn't make any sense. It's more accurate, it's more reliable if you assess the three-dimensional anatomical structure using the three-dimensional imaging modality, which in this case CBCT was we used CBCT. And I showed you even in the videos that it's very accurately you can demarcate the margins of the developing root apex. But if you have worked on the panoramic radiograph, it's very difficult to find the root apices. And we're still applying two-dimensional radiographs here in South Asia as well. In all over the world, it's very effective, as I mentioned during the start of my presentation as well. But this is the beauty of research. You try to improve methods. You try to come up with more reliable methods, and that's why we've introduced CBCT image analysis for age estimation. Dr. Yani, I think you need to unmute yourself here.
Sorry, Doctor. Yeah, thank you for your answers. I think it's clear. Well, actually, I myself do have a questions as well. So, what do you think of the accuracy and reliability of this method compared to other traditional methods?
Yes. See, because this is at a very early stage, we have developed a age estimation regression equation. Not only we have developed it, but we have also validated it on a separate sample for both of these regression equations. Now, recently, at the last article that I've shown you in my presentation, we have compared the Camerier's two-dimensional radiographic method with our three-dimensional method. And the results, there was no significant difference, statistically significant difference in the correlation values. But in terms of mean absolute error values, or the difference in calculating the dental age and the chronological age, the 3D method was much more reliable as compared to that of the Camerier's two-dimensional method. So this aspect needs to be explored further. We need to apply this method on various populations using different CBCT systems. We have to develop a more reliable method, maybe using other type of teeth as well. But in terms of the juveniles and young adults, because third molars are already only developing teeth at that phase, so we have to rely on the third molars.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah. So maybe one more, because I'm quite interested in criminology. So what do you think this, like, how do dental experts actually work with law enforcement and other forensic specialists to help solve the crimes, like by applying these methods?
Yeah, see, so the most important, okay, the straightforward, it can be applied in so many cases, in medical, legal, civil, and legal cases. But just for your answer, as far as your answer is concerned, see, the verdicts for the juveniles are different as compared to adults. So there's a big issue of how to discriminate or how to differentiate between juveniles and adults. And the age of adulthood in most of the countries is 18 years of age. So using this method, you can also come up with whether the victim or the suspect is more than 18 years of age or it's less than 18 years of age. And different age estimation models have been developed in order to assess that. As far as other laws are concerned, of course, you need to estimate the age of the children, the juveniles, and adults for other issues like for the identity cards and all these like succession to property as well, for the other issues as well. So there are so many issues in which you need to estimate dental age and you need to apply it besides criminal, civil, criminal investigations.
I believe besides the age estimation, we can also use the dentition profile to actually map to the certain personal or certain identity, right? Like unknown
Yes.
identity.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's why it's very important for disaster victim management, in which that's what we do. We compare the ante-mortem and post-mortem data and all that. So yes.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you so much, Doctor. So over the
Okay.
course of this webinar, we have explored the benefits of using CBCT imaging as well as the various factors that influence the accuracy of this method. So Dr. Muhammad definitely have been giving us a lot of invaluable insights okay, into better understanding these techniques. So last but not least, I would like to express my gratitude to all of you, okay, as well as the participants for taking the time to attend this webinar. And please look forward to our webinar series in Monday. In closing, I encourage everyone to just stay up to date to the latest development so that we can better serve our patients and improve the quality care that we provide. So thank you once again for everyone, and I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Okay,
Okay,
thank
thank
you.
you very much. Thank you very much
Bye.
for
Thank you,
having me.
Uncle.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye. See you all soon.